Let's talk about the Miami Heat. They got Norman Powell for free in the offseason. So are they good? What do we make of these lineups? Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I should be over all the butterfly eyes. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, what is it? Yeah, there's something in FanDuel, and I just forgot what I'm reading. That's it. FanDuel football season is right around the corner, and open the FanDuel app today, and you can start planning your futures bets now. I am also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And I don't know if I said that already because I feel like a bit discombobulated, but it is true that Basketball Monster is opening this week, hopefully, probably Friday US time, probably in the morning. Don't quote me on that. I don't know when it opens. I don't push the opening button. That is what I believe will be happening, but anything can change. Just be aware that that is when it will be happening. And yes, the question that you will ask, I'm sure, hey, my league is a points league. Hey, my league does this. Does your projections cater for that? Yes. Yes. Our projections are all customizable. We project out, I think, 25 different individual stats, and you just choose what your league is. It syncs up and it adjusts all the projections and points or whatever it is for your league type. Cool. Double bang the video, subscribe. You'll never miss anything that is going on across here on the channel. As we go through these team previews, we will start mock draft soon. Tiers, sleepers, busts, all that sort of stuff. I'd like to have Yahoo information open before I start doing sleepers and busts, but we might, don't hold me to this, we might get a mock draft tomorrow, maybe. We'll see. We're talking Miami Heat though, so we might as well talk Miami Heat. So to talk about the Miami Heat, I'm joined by one of the hosts of the Locked On Heat podcast. David Ramil is back on the show. David, welcome back to the show to talk about this team that I mentioned in the intro before you came on, that they were sort of inactive, Miami, and it's like, what are they going to do? Then they just were basically just given Norman Powell for nothing. I don't really understand how that came about. Like, just take Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson and we'll give you a starting caliber shooting guard for free, and that's exactly what happened. So I guess to me it feels like the offseason sort of almost just turned from that. It was just like, what are they doing? It's like, oh, no, actually that's really good, and we've got like a nucleus of players here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a little disappointing because although Heat fans were somewhat torn about acquiring Kevin Durant, however realistic or unrealistic it was, at least that would have seemed like a specific direction that the team was taking. Unfortunately, it never worked out that way. I was on board with the idea of adding a Hall of Fame level player. Why not? And yet some Heat fans were kind of upset about the idea of getting an older player, and maybe they just hadn't watched them. But either way, then for things to have not panned out that way, and for relatively few additions other than through the draft, and then all of a sudden you're able to acquire Norman Powell, and it felt like all of a sudden you were making a move in the right direction. And I think still some Heat fans might not be aware of how good Powell is and what kind of a player he's been over the last few seasons with the Clippers in Portland before that. So I think their memories of him are being kind of a bench player with the Toronto Raptors, and yet he's transformed his game, continued to develop, and he's a reliable three-point shooter and score.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that, like, I think in some circles he's overrated, in some he's completely underrated. Like, he's an unbelievably reliable scorer and shooter. You can't ask him to do huge amounts more than that, but whatever. Like, that's okay. Like, that's what he does, and that's what he's going to be asked to do. But what I want to talk about is probably the big pressing question, I think, at least from my circle in terms of talking about the fantasy appeal of this team. And I think it's probably a question in Heat circles as well, is that we saw last season midway through the year, Erik Spoelstra went to the double big lineup. Kyle Ware started next to Bam Adebayo. There were plenty of times, though, where he would do it and he'd be like, yeah, I like this. And then 3 minutes later, it would be done, and Ware would play 26 minutes, and Haywood Highsmith would play 30 minutes coming off the bench, or Nikola Jovic would play minutes, and he would be, it seemed like he was doing it, but like, see, this is what you want, and then like would stop it straight away. I don't know if I don't know if you got that impression. It was like, look, hey, here it is, guys. It doesn't work, but like I'm doing it, but like doesn't work. How do you view that combination heading into this season? Do you think that will be what Spoelstra will start off with again, or do you think he's going to go back to old trusty Highsmith in that spot next to Bam?
Well, Highsmith did get recent surgery, and although he's expected to return by training camp, he might be somewhat delayed, and he might be a little bit slower in getting back to full strength. So who knows what that rotation is going to look like. But even without the Highsmith surgery news, I still think that Khalil was about to start. I think it was going to be much more of what we saw last year as well, especially after we saw from him a kind of surge in Summer League. I think you heard Erik Spoelstra do something he hasn't done really frequently or much of all, which is to attack Khalil personally and say, look, you've got to be more professional. He's got to be better. He's got to kind of sense that this is an opportunity for him. And to Ware's, he benefited. He actually responded, and you could see that it did inspire him to some degree, and he wound up having 3 very solid games after that. So I'd like to think that Ware is going to be more like that version of that player, and he's going to play alongside Bam Adebayo and figure that role out effectively. And if that's the case, then I don't see why you wouldn't continue to go with that pairing, because I think it does work. I think they can blend each other as Bam continues to space the floor a little bit more. Ware obviously does that as well, but Ware is also, I think, a better lob threat too. So you have a great kind of choose your poison option between the two of them out there, although obviously Adebayo is still a much better playmaker for his position than Ware will ever be.
Yeah, that's the thing with Ware is that he's huge very clearly, right? And you would hope at that size with that skill level he just could have torn Summer League apart. And part of the criticism of him, that's why part of why he dropped to the Heat was this guy's not trying all the time. He's the effort's not always there. And I think Spoelstra knew the buttons and said, hey, go out there and do something. And he did. And we can talk about this, and Bam is this excellent defender. He's only 6'9". He's not particularly big, and he's also given up on blocking shots, I guess, in his career. He just doesn't do that anymore, doesn't really protect the rim like that. He has, like you mentioned, taken more threes, and at the start of last season he wasn't, and then that started to improve or increase as the season went on. So it does feel like with Ware's ability to protect the rim, his size, his the lob threat ability, his jumping ability, his ability to play close to the paint, while Bam is just not as interested in doing those things at this point in his career, the fit does make more sense. And we've seen Bam transition into this guy who is now a high usage, non-shot blocking, power forward, which again, I don't really think that many people would have seen coming from Adebayo. So do you think that we're going to see what we saw towards the end of last season, last 2 months of last season from Bam, where he was just taking more of these threes and the usage really ramped up? Do you think that is going to hold at that number, or do you think there's more to it? Bam can become more of a usage guy, more of a spacing threat?
Last year was such an aberration because you had Erik Spoelstra kind of implementing this new 5-out offense, and it didn't really work. And then he wound up changing that almost immediately to something where Bam wasn't quite comfortable and he didn't know exactly where to be on the floor. You saw him being overtly passive at times, which has always been a criticism of his. But at the same time, he was worse as a player to start the year, and you wondered whether or not he was just kind of taking it easy. And then there was the whole Jimmy Butler drama, so much of that kind of permeating throughout everything that affected this roster and this group. So it's hard to take anything from last season all too seriously. But I do agree with what you said, though. I think that he's probably going to be more of that kind of high usage player towards the end of the season, understanding his role now, knowing it's his team. He doesn't have to debate whether it's Jimmy's team or what his role is. He talked about having to endure some growing pains as not just an emotional leader, but also a leader on the court as far as being able to be more productive. And I think that's something he's going to be embracing more of this season. It was a very quiet offseason for him. He spoke briefly to media not that long ago, but other than that, I think you're going to see a renewed Bam Adebayo where he really takes over this team and figures out how to play alongside guys like Herro and Powell more effectively and help Ware more of a complementary role where he can thrive in that and not be expected to do too much and still kind of, again, be a benefit for the team to having his shot blocking and his floor spacing ability out there.
Yeah, so Bam post All-Star break averaged over 20 points a game. You can see the numbers for the full season there, which is 18, but pre-All-Star he was 16. Yeah, the Jimmy Butler stuff, I'm convinced, and not to say that I know Bam Adebayo because I very clearly don't, but it just seemed that he was very distracted or annoyed or disappointed or something. It was clearly impacting him, and there was a general malaise across the team, and it seemed like the cloud lifted and his game changed. And like 4 points per game difference, average pre and post All-Star is a big difference. And that is, I believe, largely to do with that absence of Jimmy. So I expect Bam with more of that. And I do think that Ware will be that option. And just because of those things that we just talked about, I want to come back and talk about their other star player, their all-star guard, and that is Tyler Herro. We'll come back and talk about him in a sec. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. August the 26th, which is coming up, is officially FanDuel Futures Day. A brand new holiday. I'm sure you will get work off of that. A brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and pre-season hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, you're eyeing a long shot division winner, or maybe you're ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. You might want to take a flyer on the MVP race. I know it's not going to be Odell Beckham Jr. because our Dolphins waived him yesterday, I believe. Unlucky for Odell, not going to win the MVP. Maybe you want to pick your Super Bowl winner in August. Pick it on Futures Day. Maybe you want to parlay your long shot division winners and see what you can come up with there. You can visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets today. Browse, or because, not browse, that's the wrong word, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game, and of course, don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, so I feel like as I love Erik Spoelstra as a coach. I think he's the best coach in the NBA up there with all. Well, him and Mike Dag not very close at this point, but Spoelstra's done it for a sustained period of time, right? He is someone, though, that does go back and forward on things quite a bit in terms of the stuff we just talked about with the bigs, and even with Tyler Herro as a point guard. He was a bench guard, now he was a shooting guard, and then he was a point guard last season, and then they brought Davion Mitchell in, and Davion Mitchell came off the bench, and then Davion Mitchell played 35 minutes off the bench because he was working as the point guard, and so it feels like it's just a little bit all over the place. Now, with the acquisition of Norman Powell, I find it very hard to see how Davion Mitchell will be in that starting group or even playing those 35 minutes a night versus when Duncan Robinson was starting and playing like 23 and they do the old switcheroo. So I'm guessing that Tyler Herro is back as that full-time point guard the way he was to begin last season. Is that how you... I say, is that how you're seeing it? But I don't know how else you could. Like, unless, again, Spoelstra's always going to change his mind. But that's how I feel like we're back at Herro with that role, limiting what that upside is, I guess, that Mitchell was pushed into last season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Mitchell's a natural playmaker anyway,
not.
But at the same time, Herro has developed in that regard. So I would say that he's probably going to continue to develop, and I think he's going to continue to be the de facto point guard for this team. Although I just don't know what his ceiling in that capacity could be. We've seen him make improvements. He does make the easy pass. He's better at being able to absorb contact now than he was as a younger player. He can finish a little bit higher at the rim and still draw the extra defender to make that next pass to somebody. But he's not a natural point guard. I mean, he's just a guy who's been asked to score, and that's been his whole career up to this point, and even as a collegiate player. So is he ready for this responsibility? I think so, and yet I don't know if we're going to continue to see growing pains from him in that regard. How much of he'll be shouldering that responsibility? Will we see Powell in that regard as well? Will we see Bam generate more offense? There's options off the bench too, but I think you're going to see Herro probably take on the bulk of that responsibility.
So he averaged 5.5 assists per game last season, remembering again that in the first half of the season, Jimmy Butler was, I guess, there in body for some of the time, not really in mind or spirit. And then at the second half of the season, we did get Davion playing, like, again, this weird rotation where he sit on the bench, but then play every other minute of the game, basically, and played like 35 minutes a night. He's not really a point guard, but he's point guard size, and he did at least share that ball handling responsibility. And even if you don't consider Davion Mitchell a pure point guard, which he isn't, he's very much so a better dribbler and passer than what Norman Powell is, and what then Andrew Wiggins is. So, those other guys who will be in that lineup, it is a different story. Talk about Mitchell because he was an afterthought, I guess, at the trade deadline. He did nothing in Sacramento. He did nothing really in Toronto. He's very undersized with an iffy shot, and then came on, and I thought he played really well in Miami. They signed him to a contract, though, which again would suggest that, hey, you did well, but you're a bench player. That's the sort of level of that contract, and I think that's where he's at. What do you see his role? I think it seems pretty clear that not pretty clear, but he could be the sixth man. But again, there's many other players in that group. Jovic, Highsmith, Jaquez. We heard Pelle Larson in that role last season. So out of that group of guys, Mitchell should be getting the bulk of those minutes, I imagine, David.
I think so. It depends on whether or not you have Herro, Powell stay out of foul trouble, I guess, or if they're getting going. Like Mitchell was such a spark, and he became such a quick fan favorite because I think, again, he was a player that a lot of people didn't really know too much about, and then he wound up providing this bulldog perimeter point of attack defense and shot over 45% in his stint with Miami. That'll always help, especially during some big runs in the play-in tournament and things of that sort. So, like, he was really, really good in that regard. Of course, you don't expect him to continue shooting at such a high level, but at least the defense is going to be there. And if he can continue to space the floor, I see him getting a lot of those minutes. But to your point, he can't play as many minutes as he did towards that run last year. Not because I think you're kind of taking away one of Miami's only strengths, which might be their depth. I think you've got so many other players that can do something and contribute to winning, where we've talked about this on the show. One of the things that Erik Spoelstra might have to do is just have like a 10 to 11 man rotation, depending on who might have the hot hand on a game-to-game basis, or maybe even situationally based or something like that. Something Spo is typically not, he's not prone to do, but yet with all these guys who have all these different varied skills that they can provide, you're going to have to find a way to utilize them, because you can't keep Jaime Jaquez on the bench. You can't keep Nikola Jovic on the bench. You're going to have to find a way to play them semi-regularly, but yet it's somewhat clouded there unless they make some kind of another trade in between now and the start of training camp, which I don't foresee. But as far as Mitchell is concerned, yes, he's going to have, I think, a lot of playing time, and yet probably not as much as last year.
You hit the nail on the head of something that I think is going to be a big theme across the NBA this season. We know that all sports leagues are copycat leagues, and they go, oh, that's something that worked. Should we try that? And the Indiana Pacers would play their starters lower minutes. They'd play a deep rotation, and they'd just go balls out the entire 48 minutes and put pressure on the whole way. And the way to do that is have a lot of good players and have a deep rotation and have guys that are interchangeable and you can put into different situations. And you mentioned the Heat lineup. If I look at their team, I would say that their 12th guy is either Pelle Larsson or Simone Fontecchio, easily players who could be spot starters or rotation guys. We haven't even mentioned the name Terry Rozier. I don't know what the hell's going on with him, but like, he's a player that was a starter for big chunks of last season. But that's another name that's in that mix. And there are just so many guys there. Like the other two guys on full contracts, Kashard Johnson, who I think he might be an okay player, and then first round pick Kasparas Yakichonis, like, they're not going to really see the floor because there's just too much of this depth. So when we're talking about some of these players that we might get excited about, whether that is Davion Mitchell or even Jaime Jaquez or whatever, like, just understanding how those minutes are going to distribute through the bench, it's really tough just because of all those guys are there. And I think Spoelstra, either through that play style or just the fact that those guys all need to play, he's going to have to go deeper. And I don't. Some teams do it like Indiana did by pulling some of the top end minutes of their starters down. Or others just play 7 bench guys, 15 minutes each. So there's two different ways of going about that. And it will be very interesting to see the way that Miami and Spoelstra do attack that. But it does seem like an inevitability, David, that's going to be the direction they have to go.
Yeah, I would say so. But yet Spo has been so so reluctant to do it that you never know. Like, he could just zig when the rest of the league is zagging, and he's found a way to make it work until it doesn't. So it's really hard to predict with Spo. So I don't know, but I'd like to see that. Like, you nailed it as far as the 3 players at the end of the rotation. I think it's going to be Yakichonis. I think it's going to be Rozier. Although there's always a possibility he could have an amazing training camp and be free of the off-court distractions and then become the incredible scorer he was with the Charlotte Hornets. But, who knows? So I'm not counting on that, and I don't think the rest of the Heat fan base is either. And yet, if he winds up becoming an addition to the roster at some point and actually playing, who knows? It would be a welcome distraction.
If he does do that, then I think we can never ever doubt the impact of like the mental side of the game on player production, because I've never seen someone look more washed in my life than what I saw with Terry Rozier last season. But if he comes out and is good again, we go, well, okay, we very clearly know what was actually happening there to create some of these problems. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of these other younger guys in a bit more detail in a sec, including someone that Heat fans were in love with 2 years ago as a rookie, and there was a lot of superlatives thrown around about Jaime Jaquez, and I would say that he was a pretty sizable disappointment last season. Jaquez had opportunities to start. There were games where Jimmy was out and he was suspended and he was missing plane trips, and Jaquez would start and he would be bad and the shot wasn't there, and he sort of found himself not necessarily in the doghouse, because again, this is sort of who I think Jaquez is as a player. But he wasn't, like, he didn't take any steps forward. He took steps backwards, and now, like, this is part of the not the concern, but when you talk about guys who are coming to the league older and then they have like developmental step backs or plateaus, that like your time to start to really make that hay and move forward with it becomes harder, because he's already 24 and we're 2 years in, and it was a big disappointment. What do you attribute some of the disappointments with Jaquez last season, and how can he put himself ahead of that group of Rozier and Mitchell and Highsmith and all of those sort of bench guys? How can he make himself the 27 minute a night sixth man? I don't think he can, but like what can he do to get back on track?
I mean, last summer, he was a little busy. He was with the Team USA select group there, so he was competing against the best of the best on the way to the Olympics, et cetera. And you thought the future was going to be bright for him coming off of a nice playoff run, et cetera. And it didn't really work out that way. And then he gets, I think he sustained Montezuma's revenge, or what they were calling intestinal issues, after a trip to Mexico. Then there was a groin pull that's been a nagging injury since he joined the league. I think even going back to his UCLA days. And then it was more intestinal issues, and you're like wondering what the heck did he eat in Mexico City? Because he can't seem to stay off the toilet or something. It's just. It's unbelievable. Like, this guy has like lost significant amount of weight, and he was just never back in shape, and he was always out of the rotation. It's like, wow. And for a team like the Heat that never really divulges too much, it's like, wow, this is a lot of intestinal issues for one player to be dealing with. So, we had quite a few jokes among the media about it. But at the same time, I think that was always eating away at him. No pun intended. And yet, I think he was also figured out to a certain degree. So whatever limited athleticism he had, or explosive athleticism, because I think he's still kind of in that tween range as far as being somewhat athletic, he just wasn't able to really implement that on the floor as regularly. And I think a lot of the teams figured him out, like defensively. Like, he's going to try to get downhill and try to pull that spin move. But if he's not explosive with it, if he's not as direct or intent with it as he's been in the past, you could probably shut that down. You move your feet just a little bit, and all of a sudden you're going to be able to block that spin move off, and it's going to lead to a probably missed field goal opportunity, or maybe even a block shot. We saw that a lot from Jaime last year. And without the three-point shot to complement it or offset it, he's going to be somewhat limited offensively. And I think he just wound up having a really bad season.
Yeah, he did. Like, there's no doubt that he was poor. Like, this is just opening up a world of nicknames for me for Jaime Jaquez. I forgot about all these issues. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if he played for Miami at all, but Rodney Hood, when he was in the league, he used to come into games and he used to have these like anxiety stuff, and then like he'd play, and then like a minute later he'd have to go run to the toilet to do a shit because of anxiety, and then he'd come back out. It would happen like, I reckon 7 or 8 times a year, where because Rodney Hood's run to the locker room, and then he's like, what is going on? He just was on the court for tip off, and he was out, and that happened to him all the time. Not saying it's the same thing, nothing to do with Mexico, but that was something that happened, and that just brought up my Rodney Hood memory. So there you go. In terms of the young guys stepping up, this is someone that players or fans, I guess, are pretty excited about, and I thought he was starting to get there last season, and that is Nikola Jovic. He suffered an injury, though, that sort of set him back. I think it was a broken hand, and then basically when he came back, they were like, thanks, Nikola, but we've got Andrew Wiggins now, and I don't really know where you fit in. And now I sort of sit in the same spot and go, look, where does he fit in? Because you've got Wiggins, you've got Ware, you've got Bam, you got Spoelstra's adopted nephew Haywood Highsmith in that mix as well. So where does Jovic fit? Is he a 3? Is he a 4? Is he a small ball 5? How does he get into this role? If I think of any of these younger sort of players, Mitchell, Jaquez, or Jovic are going to step up, it probably could be Jovic. I think he's the most talented, but also I don't really get the path to the minutes here.
Yeah, that's a huge question. And I think that the Heat are still believers in what he can do. And he was given an opportunity to start last year at the beginning of the season, and he kind of just wasn't really very reliable. You could see him lose confidence so frequently, especially if his shot wasn't falling, and it rarely did to start the year. He wound up being out of the rotation and just falling completely into Spo's doghouse. And then he winds up building his way back. And as you said, unfortunately, then just as he's showing promise, and you're like, okay, not only is he a good player, but he's actually impactful in making those kind of quote-unquote winning plays that Spoelstra loves so much, then he gets hurt. He's put on the weight again. I think he's just going to be slid into that backup 5 spot just because you don't have any other options.
Well, I know that there's no centers. This team has no centers. That's part of my thing where I was like, are they going to start Ware? Because there is nobody else to play that role.
Right. So you got Ware and Bam, so you're going to stagger their minutes for sure. They're kicking the tires on Kai Jones from what we've heard. But I don't know if that's going to pan out or not. So at this point in time, you've got Vlad Golden, an undrafted rookie. Great, I guess. So I think you're going to see Nico at the 5 a lot. And I think that's kind of limiting what he can do. I don't know how it's going to be a small ball rotation, I guess, in style of play as well. So that's fine. I think he can handle it now. I think he's put on the muscle mass from what we've seen from Euro basketball. Like you've seen him put on more muscle, more weight. So he's going to be a little bit more durable. At least that's the case. That's the hope anyway. And I think even from that center position, ostensibly, he's still going to be able to play as a playmaker. We've seen that from Bam Adebayo over the years as well. And I think we see him be able to space the floor because that is a strength of his game. As long as he continues to rebound and defend at a higher level. And we did see progress from him in that regard. So I think, yeah, to your point, I agree 100%. I think he represents the most potential on Miami's bench because otherwise you've got pretty limited players. Like as good as Mitchell was in a Heat uniform, I don't think there's much another level for him to reach. You can continue to tweak here and there, but again, 45% not sustainable from 3-point range. Jaime Jaquez limited. I can't see him taking that step. Haywood Highsmith, who knows? He probably shouldn't be out there. Probably wouldn't be out there for any other Heat team, but Spo loves him, so he's going to continue to play him. So that leaves Nico, and I think he's going to tap into that potential. But he has to stay healthy, and it's also a contract year as he's entering restricted free agency. So you have to, from his perspective, he has to be able to continue to build the case as to why he should be an NBA player.
What's also, I've got so many funny things, not even funny things, but like we talk about like small ball, and it's like, oh, if Jovic plays, like he's taller than Bam Adebayo, right? Like he's, but like
yes.
He also has the similar sort of block rate as Bam Adebayo in that like he doesn't do any of that, like never protects the rim, but he's taller than Bam. But like small ball is more of it's a mindset, it's a state of being. It's not necessarily how actually tall you are because again, he's taller, but he doesn't do any of the tall stuff. He doesn't do any of the strong stuff. He doesn't do any of the big stuff. He plays with a smaller mentality than his 6'10", 6'11" frame. The next part, did you know where Nikola Jovic was born? Because I'm just looking up his basketball reference page and I did not know this at all.
Yeah, London, right?
Yeah, what? Okay, so he's English apparently. He's obviously not, but like he was born in England, and that's how you know you're on the ball, David, because you're
water polo too. That was his sport growing up was water polo.
Wow. Okay, that's one of the craziest sports. Anyway, we don't want to get into a discussion about water polo because that's an unbelievably crazy sport. But yeah, like Jovic is this player with like. He's plays this center role that's not really a center, and it's more of that 5-out stuff. And he didn't shoot at all as a rookie, and then he's shot high 30s, almost 40% the last 2 seasons. I am intrigued to see where it goes, but of course, it's just going to take some sort of either step forward or injury opportunity to open it all up for him because of the way that this rotation is set up. But David, your rotation is set up so that you are going to be hosting the Locked On Heat podcast 5 days a week and covering all of this Heat news for us, including the Spoelstra rotation mechanics. One of the jokes that I would have on my show talking about the Heat and the rotations is that we would see this over 4 or 5 times this season. We'd see Haywood Highsmith start, and then we'd go, Spoelstra would look at him and go, what's this guy doing out here? And then we see the minutes go 29 and 27, then it'd be 24, then it'd be 21, then he wouldn't play the second half, he'd go, all right, he's done. And then he's out of the rotation. And then it'd be 6 games, and then the idea is Spoelstra would be look down the bench and go, who's that guy down there? Maybe we give him a go. And then Highsmith's back in the starting lineup. And then the same cycle happens again. And then he goes, you know what? It didn't work for me last time, but maybe it works this time. And the same shit happens. And it just keeps happening and happening. And I look forward to that repeating 6 or 7 times again this season. And I'm sure you'll cover it, no doubt, for us over on Locked On Heat. David, thank you again for coming on and talking about Miami and their fortunes for the upcoming season.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. And you're spot on in your analysis of Highsmith's minutes, sir.
The old Haywood Highsmith cycle. You know what's going to happen again, and I cannot wait to make fun of it. Guys, you know what to do. You subscribe to the show. You double bang. You leave your comments down below. Raptors is coming. I'm saving the worst to last, so they're coming. Don't worry. We're going to be talking about them. Should be next. You never know. Double bang, thumb, comment. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.